A cooldown is on the way to the United States as we go into the weekend ahead and towards next week, and this cooldown is going to come in quickly enough to force Tropical Storm Debby off the East Coast and also bring in a generally new weather pattern that could last us through a lot of next week. This video's got the details on that with some of my custom graphics and a look at the tropics.
One Nation Weather.
I appreciate you for joining me right here at One Nation Weather. Don't forget that many of the model maps that I use throughout the intro to my videos, into the actual content of the videos as well, are from WeatherBell. If you want those same maps, there is a free trial link right down below this video in the description. Also, if you're new to the channel, there is that subscribe button down below this video as well, just right around that description area too. If you want to hit that after watching my video, especially if you like it, at least consider that if you want more consistent, accurate, and educational forecasts in the future. Let's get right into it, everyone, with that mid-level jet stream. We're closing out a week, and we're going to move into the weekend and next week with this jet stream to kind of show you what's going on in the atmosphere, because what's going on in the atmosphere often dictates what's going on near the surface, and exactly what's going to be happening with this piece of energy moving from the Dakotas and Nebraska all the way on over there towards Michigan and Ohio is it's going to be bringing some cooler and drier air underneath it. There's a low pressure system in connection to this in the upper levels there, right above the upper peninsula of Michigan. They're in southern parts of Canada. Wrapping around that, we don't have much precipitation, but we do have that cooler, drier air, and that same blast is what's actually going to knock Debby out of the picture. You see those greens, yellows, and oranges and reds quickly moving out of the northeast U.S. right out ahead of that pulse of energy. To paraphrase everything I just said, there's going to be cooler and drier air moving into the northern and central U.S. as we go into the weekend. There's going to be Debby moving out of the northeast U.S. as a result of that same slam of jet stream energy. And here's that same jet. Notice the positioning, and it is changed by the time we go towards our Monday. This is as we go into the afternoon and evening. Look at those blues. You know, it's not as strong as those greens you were looking at earlier, but you can definitely see at least a modest cooldown is probably going to be following this down from the Dakotas all the way down there towards the Carolinas as we start next week. The jet stream will begin to lift back northward in some areas of the central U.S. further down the line. I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. I'll also be talking about this cooldown in greater detail a little bit further along too. Make sure that you're using those timestamps right down there below in the description to this video to access specific parts of the video if you would like to do so. But let's go ahead and get right into that future radar to kind of go along with that jet stream pattern that I just showed you. Starting out by going to the end of this week, just like I was doing with the jet stream. This is when Debby's still closing out over some parts of the northeastern United States, and really anywhere from the eastern North Carolina coast all the way up there to Maine, we'll be seeing at least some chance of scattered showers and storms from Debby. And what is left of this post-tropical depression that it will be over some part of Pennsylvania and New York at this time, heading towards the evening time frame. We will also be watching the isolated tornado potential that we'll have on the southeastern side of that low, so anywhere here along that east coast mid-Atlantic corridor. And then, of course, the flooding will be a big concern with any of those heavier downpours that we get. Meanwhile, behind Debby, here's what's pushing Debby out of the picture. These cooler, drier northwest to southeast pushes of wind are going to be really useful in drying things out in Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, and points surrounding that. A little bit of precip up there in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin from the low producing this cooldown, and then also some flooding chances over there on the southwest side of those arrows in the Four Corners heading out of Friday into our Saturday. And in fact, the area that's going to remain active as we go into the weekend is going to be over there in some parts of the Mountain West, coming on out there maybe into some areas of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Pretty normal to get some level of shower and thunderstorm activity out there in the plains this time of the year. In fact, some of this could be on the isolated to scattered severe side. I don't think we're going to see any major days of severe weather, but there could be at least some isolated scattered pockets in a few of these states. So keep that in mind, really coming out of the front range there of the Rockies, even in some parts of the Four Corners region, out there into the Central Plains. The pattern doesn't look generally favorable for widespread severe weather, but there could be a few pockets where we get some of those isolated to scattered lower end events to get in the mix. Speaking of severe weather, again, use those timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to the other parts of this forecast, including that cool down tropical forecast for down the line. But speaking of that severe weather, here's my ONW severe scale for what is left of Debby as it's going to be post-tropical going towards our Friday, August 9th. Scattered severe weather is evident in the forecast for parts of the northeast and mid-Atlantic as a result of the storm Friday and connections to the remnants as that strong atmospheric wind profile will be resulting. The damaging wind clusters with those gusts possibly around 55 to 70 miles per hour in scattered fashion, as well as some storms with spin-up tornadoes appear to be the main concerns. Even just some minimal cracks there in between the clouds, bringing in some sunshine, could really elevate that threat there from Maryland all the way on up there into some parts of New York and surrounding locations. Speaking of that threat, here's your significant tornado parameter, or aka what I like to call your tornado energy. Notice it being forced eastward through our late Friday as those storms push through. The energy looks modest, but the storms are going to be able to get going anyway, and in fact, let's talk about those storms as what's left of Debby, which is a tropical depression now as I film this video, is going to continue moving north. As we go into our Friday early morning, we're probably going to be seeing flooding by the time we go towards 2, 3, 4 a.m. that could carry over into the morning time commute anywhere from central Virginia up there to central and southern parts of New York. You don't want to be that person getting in a water rescue situation if you're out on the roadways, so please be mindful of this heavy rain. Look how heavily it is going to be pouring there in some parts of central Pennsylvania, up there into some areas of New York. Even as we go towards the midday time frame, this is 6 to 8 to 10 plus hours of heavy downpours in this vicinity here. So please be ready for not only that tornado threat that could develop in some of these locations by the afternoon, but also that very significant flood threat that will even be ongoing into the morning commute before anything else picks up with that daytime heating. Speaking of that daytime heating, let's go ahead and take a look at how things are going to erupt as we go to the afternoon hours. Really, this line is going to be kind of already there over some parts of Pennsylvania and New York. It's just going to really form out and become a little bit more of a thin line. Those are those kinds of lines that help to produce those damaging winds and isolated spin-ups. Ithaca down to Baltimore, we could have some mid-afternoon storms. Anywhere there from central New York down to Maryland, in other words, that's where the best chance for severe weather will be. By the time we get into the evening rush hour, this is just a simulation, don't trust it with your life, but heading from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 o'clock in the evening, it looks like these storms could push towards places like New York City, over there to Poughkeepsie, I hope I'm pronouncing that right there, in southeastern New York. And also notice those little appendages on this line. These cells, the more individual they stay, the more they're able to individually tap into that fiery environment, the better chance we have of getting some, maybe even stronger tornadoes. So be on the lookout for that, and then heavy rainfall will move towards Boston into the nighttime, Friday night going into our Saturday. Speaking of that heavy rainfall, here's the total precipitation according to that HRRR model, and it really goes right in line with where the Weather Prediction Center has outlined that highest flood threat, and it's going to be right in through here, right along where that low pressure center is going to move. We'll have not only those gusty winds, of course, that many areas will see. Some spots are under wind advisory, so check weather.gov for those. Of course, we'll also be watching that heavy rainfall, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain, and say a 12-hour period for a lot of these locations. That's going to instigate flooding. We'll at least have some areas of flooding further east of that, though, where we get some of those heavier thunderstorms that could even produce tornadoes in places like New York City, up there into western Massachusetts, southwest Maine. Of course, we'll also be watching those downpours. These downpours, of course, are going to be forced away by the cool down. Look at these dew points. This is what this graphic is showing you. They're going to cascade downward, and what that means is that our temperatures are going to feel a lot nicer on your skin. Let's go day by day with those temperature anomalies, starting with our August 9th, which is our Friday, going into our 10th, which is our Saturday. The most below average temperatures are going to be expected to be in some parts of Nebraska and Kansas, as well as on up there in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, as well as the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The entire northern corridor of the U.S., except for the Pacific Northwest, looking below average for this time of the year by around at least 5 to 10 degrees. The southern U.S. and the western U.S. being the exception, with warmer than average conditions expected. Here we go towards the 11th and the 12th, so now we're going towards Sunday going into our Monday. Notice, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that jet stream is going to be cascading a little further south, so we're going to notice those cooler than average temperatures even moving into some areas in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Southeast. That also means that we're going to be seeing this jet stream weaken a bit, so those anomalies aren't going to be quite as ferocious over some of these locations, and you're not going to notice the difference as much. That cooldown will continue to break down in some areas of the eastern U.S. as we go towards the early to mid part of next week. In fact, there's going to be little areas here in the blue where we're a little cooler than average. That includes the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and East Coast, whereas other areas like the Southwest and there into the South Central will be closer to being around average to warmer than average for this time of the year. Let's take a look at what that looks like with our actual daily high temperatures. Let's start with the end of this week, and of course we're going to carry all the way towards the start of next week as well. Here's our Friday, August 9th of 2024. Look how cool some of these temperatures are going to be in the central and north central United States, starting out in this general area. If you're in the circled area, we're looking at highs only in the 60s and 70s as we go towards the end, or the peak heating of the afternoon, I should say, on our Friday, August 9th. So 60s and 70s anywhere here in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, all the way over there towards Michigan and Indiana, and the northern parts of Indiana and Illinois especially. Enjoy these temperatures if you like fall-like weather, because this is really what these temperatures are more like fall than summer, or say late spring than summer in this region. Here we go towards our Saturday. There's that line. If you're south of this line, you're looking at plenty of 80s and 90s and quite a bit of humidity. If you're north of this line, you're looking at lower humidity, and those circles even indicate some record-breaking minimum highs where it's never been this cool for a high temperature before in those areas. So that's very interesting, at least since records have been kept in those locations there of Oklahoma, Missouri, up there towards Nebraska. It's going to be close to records even in some spots between those. And then as we go towards our Sunday, August 11th, we continue to see things cool down even here in the northeast U.S. Up there in some areas in the higher elevations of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, it's going to be hard to get past about 65 degrees. Other areas, well, only into the 60s and 70s there, whereas we're well up into the 80s, 90s, and triple digits in this area. This is going to be that peak area for the heat in the next several days. Parts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, into southwest Georgia. It is just going to be cranking up in terms of those triple-digit heat index values. That might continue even as we go towards Monday and Tuesday. That's where that heat will continue to be felt even when the cool down is impacting others. Heading towards the mid part of next week, heading out of Tuesday towards Wednesday, we're going to see heat probably return into some areas of the plains further north. That could be as a ridging pattern develops. And in fact, here's a look at that mid-level pattern from our European ensemble members. I'm using that arrow on screen to really show you that those yellows and oranges are agreement in this kind of meme setup here between these ensemble members that indicate we're going to see some warmer than average air and high pressure likely enter the central U.S. heading towards the middle to back half of next week. Now, what does that mean in terms of not only our temperatures, but our precipitation? Looks like here we go towards our Wednesday of next week. It's going to be pretty active for, I think, a lot of the central U.S. Starting the week, even heading towards the midweek time frame. You know, I was talking earlier in the video about how a lot of the central U.S. locations will have to watch out for at least isolated to severe weather events. We could see things pick up even beyond that if we get a ring of fire out of this heading towards Thursday, towards Friday of next week. This is 6 to 7 days out from when I'm filming this video, so take this with a grain of salt. But the European model is certainly picking up on an area anywhere from the Dakotas and Minnesota down here to the Ohio Valley where we could see some severe weather in the mix. You know, I don't want to point out that it's going to happen. I don't want to act like it will happen in any area. It just looks a little bit more favorable through this zone on that periphery of that high pressure system for severe weather. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, but I'm also looking at this area of interest that when I'm filming this video has a 40% chance of development out here all of a sudden in the main development region of the Atlantic while moving towards those lesser and greater Antilles, as well as those islands such as Puerto Rico and Hispaniola in the northern Caribbean and the far south central areas of that main Atlantic basin. This system does have a pretty good chance, even further down the line, of becoming possibly our next hurricane. The European model and the GFS model are hinting at it. And look at these European ensemble members that are averaged out to really show you. Here's one system that's likely going to make its way in towards that northwesterly direction. This is that one that has that 40% chance of development right now. They have even higher confidence on something forming right behind that. So it is no surprise that it looks like we are going to be making our way into that possibly record-breaking hurricane season, even if it's starting a little bit later than some people expected. The values that were issued by the Colorado State University, the National Hurricane Center, those seem like they could come out true in some parts of the Atlantic if this type of pattern were to set up. It's certainly something to watch when we've already got one area of interest out there. By the way, just keep in mind that little area in the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. That is just from what is left of Debby. So, of course, there's guaranteed development there because that development has already happened. All right, if you want more consistent, accurate, and educational weather forecasts in the future right here at One Nation Weather, consider hitting that subscribe button right down there below the video. I'll answer any comments, questions, concerns you have down below as well as soon as I possibly can. That is it for this update. I will see you right here in the next one, which will probably be sometime this weekend.
One Nation Weather.